If you are one of those people, and mostly men that I see in my practice, who have been told by their partners that you are not a good partner, that you don't know how to relate, now I'm speaking to men, how to relate to a woman, but it happens to women too, that they don't know how to relate to their partner. And if you have been told that repeatedly by maybe different partners, maybe it's time to think about that, because it's probably true. And it's probably because you don't know how to be vulnerable. Okay, you see, vulnerability and knowing how to be vulnerable is not weakness, it's actually the greatest strength that a person can have. Now, when you were little, if you don't know how to be vulnerable, that means that when you were little, vulnerability did not feel safe. You were either attacked or criticized or blamed or even punished or maybe ridiculed for your feelings. Maybe you were told you were too sensitive, maybe you were punished for it, maybe you were just ignored for it. And maybe you know, when you were little and you had this overwhelming sense of discomfort or emotional pain, of abandonment or rejection, and nobody cared. So you didn't have to be abused necessarily mentally or emotionally. Even that just nobody cared, or nobody had enough time maybe to help you self-soothe and process that and negotiate that. What happened, you concluded in your little unconscious, semi-conscious mind, mainly unconscious, that it's not safe to be vulnerable because it feels overwhelming and it leaves you feeling powerless and it leaves you feeling absolutely awful and you don't know what to do with it. So you learn how to run away from it, how to hide from it. And you know what I also noticed, that people who have learned to shield from vulnerability, what happens often is that as a result in their current relationships, adult relationships or so-called adult relationships, they either fly into rage or shame and guilt that results in withdrawing and stonewalling. So in one of those two, and neither is a recipe for a good relationship. So while it's not your fault that you were raised that way and that you learned that it's unsafe to be vulnerable, and it surely was unsafe if that's what you learned back then. However, now you're an adult and you can create that safety for yourself. That's the good news. You can learn how to become a better partner, a more desired partner, a better person by learning how to be more vulnerable. So what do you need to do? When you recognize that you're feeling that vulnerability, that you're feeling maybe shame or guilt or anger and you want to push back or attack or pull away, take time with yourself. Name that. Remember, oh, I know, this is my response, default response, my protection from vulnerability. So what do I do about that? I want to be more vulnerable because vulnerability is strength. So talk to yourself, because when you do, as an adult, you're talking to a younger part of you that's stuck believing that vulnerability is extremely unsafe. And that younger part of you will hear that. Or just simply take time to self-soothe, to self-regulate, which you couldn't do when you were little because you had no capacity to do that. You relied on your caregivers, your parents probably, and they probably that they had no capacity, they were not functional well, or they were not there, or whatever their reason was. That's irrelevant now. This is not about blaming your parents or anyone. It's just about fact that you didn't have that sense of safety then, but that you can remind yourself from a position of a conscious adult that this time it's different because you are an adult and it's safe. And you can even ask yourself, well, what's the worst case scenario if I show my feelings to my partner? What could happen? Well, maybe they can ridicule me or put me down or criticize me or even leave me, which is highly unlikely. However, if they do, is that a kind of a partner I want to be with? if I express myself, of course, with awareness and with respect for yourself and for the other person, and if that leads them to rejecting me and leaving me, is that a kind of a partner I need in my life? That's number one question, right? And number two question is, even if that happens, will I survive that? And the answer is, of course. And I will be better for it without such an unhealthy partner with whom I cannot come out safely to be a person that I'm meant to be. It's as simple and as difficult as that. It starts with that conscious decision, and then it's a journey, as everything, with ups and downs. So bon voyage.